And we are back on the build phase. I'm Mr. Ben, and today I am recording episode 400 of this podcast. Technically, this will be the 417th episode in the podcast feed. I mean, we've had a few improperly or weirdly numbered episodes over the years, and it has been years. So I had this thing, I had this thing planned, and it wasn't originally planned to be the episode 400 episode, but then I was like, oh, it would be the perfect fit for it. And scheduling is always like, I do more than one podcast. I've done a lot of podcasts over the years. I don't know how many thousands of minutes, hours I've spent talking into microphones for various podcasts, but the scheduling part of multi-person podcasts is the worst part. It's the reason I started a solo show, and it's the reason I have been most consistent. Like the show that I have been a part of that has most consistently put out stuff and lasted the longest is the one that I do by myself because there's no scheduling issue. Now I understand there is maybe a content quality hit that's taken. Having more than one opinion on a show makes a show better. Generally speaking, I think like to have somebody here in real time to go, hey, wait, you misread that card, or hey, wait, you didn't consider this when performing that card analysis. Like having that real time error correction, I think is definitely valuable. But like there's that old phrase, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And yes, if I had real time error correction in the form of a co-host, that would be pushing the show closer towards like the perfect versus podcast, but it might result in fewer episodes or less consistent episodes. And while 417 or 400, even if we just round it off to this numbered episode 400 here, that sounds like a big number. I actually went back and we started this show on July 6th, 2016. That's actually not fair. I posted the first episode on July 6th, 2016. I started work on it before that. That means I've been doing this show for 7 years, 5 months, and 7 days. And having 400 plus episodes over that time feels pretty decent. In fact, it's been 388 weeks. And yes, I used a website to figure this out. I did not do this math myself. So I trust howlongagogo.com, I guess, for this data. 388 weeks, which means I have successfully hit more than once per week, even though I have not necessarily maintained a weekly schedule. I have averaged out to having more episodes than the number of weeks. However, if you remember, if you've been around since back in the day, my plan when I originally started this show was to do 2 episodes a week, in which case I should have made 776 episodes. So I was scolding myself a little bit for that. But at the same time, the original plan was to do 5 to 10 minute episodes only. And I've done multiple episodes that have exceeded an hour. So I don't know. I don't know how much scolding I can send my own way for maybe not hitting the episode count that I wanted, letting the work kind of guide itself, letting the project become different things over the years. I've gone through phases where I've done more interviews. I've gone through phases where I focused more on fantasy cards or the theme, the IP. I've gone through phases where I've gotten really hardcore about card analysis from a competitive setting. And letting the show kind of be different things, I think, is part of its longevity, because there have been a few times where I have looked long and hard at this show and thought, am I going to be able to keep doing this? There've been a few times where the game maybe wasn't in the best place, or there was some like nastiness in the community that was making it hard for me to focus on the positives, or where I just straight up wanted to play other things. Like, I don't want to do this show if it feels like work. Now, I'm willing to put work in, but it's like the work you put into a passion project. I want to enjoy doing the work because I enjoy doing the work. And the handful of episodes over the years where I felt like I sat down and forced myself to talk about Versus, even though I didn't really have anything to say because there wasn't new cards, or I didn't want to say anything because there was like some weirdness in the community. There's some things I don't need to hash out on a microphone. You know what I mean? Over the years, I have been very fortunate that working on this project has afforded me opportunities that I might not have otherwise encountered. I have met people and forged friendships that probably wouldn't be where they are, if at all, if not for the existence of this show and the existence of this game. I think back on episode 300, I went on at some length about how much this game has meant to me. And if I remember right, I think episode 300 was like right in the height of COVID stuff. I probably could have like looked this up before I sat down to record. Episode 300 was September 1st of 2021. This was a couple years ago. And I definitely remember feeling the weight of the last couple years when I recorded that. That was a bad year. I mean, we've had a series of bad years around here, and it has at sometimes interfered with the work and made it difficult. In 2021, both my parents had like major health scares. One of them got real close, actually. Not COVID related, but I mean, that was flying around at that time too. At the conclusion of last year, I had some real challenges crop up in the form of, well, I don't want to put my teenager's business on blast. Point is, I've been doing this show, and it has over the years, as I've done it, grown and changed, and it means something different to me now than when I started it. And the friendships, the connections that I've made because of this show, the conversations I've had for no reason other than this show. Like, I can't envision a scenario where I would have been able to sit down and talk to Danny and Ben for, in Danny's case, several hours about the game and just geek out about what other games do you like? What things do you play? I feel really lucky that this project has opened some kind of weird doors for me. Not just within the world of Versus and the kind of contacts that I've been able to make and conversations that I've had. Man, that sounds a little, how do I say this? I want to express gratitude for the way this project has impacted my life without making it sound like I'm just patting myself on the back for doing this thing nobody asked me to do. And I'm not sure I can stick that. I'm not sure I know how to string together those words in such a way. So at the risk of sounding self-aggrandizing, at the risk of sounding maybe a little too proud of what I've worked on, I really just want to be grateful for the listeners. And without people enjoying what I'm working on, it probably would have stopped a long time ago. You know, I feel like all creators sort of say this thing, and it is really true. I do this for myself. I started this show because I wanted to talk about cards more than my wife wanted to hear about them. I really have always tried to use it and create something of value, something that the listener is going to get more out. They're going to walk away having a better understanding of the game or a different understanding of the game. I mean, if somebody listens to a show of mine and the conclusion they come to is that I don't know what I'm talking about and that they were right in their opinions all along, I think that's fine. I think that's good. Like, let that be, if that's a contribution I can make, is by making a mistake and that lets somebody else solidify their understanding of how the game works. I mean, that's not ideal, obviously. I'd rather be correct and give people good information than teach through error. But at the same time, I've literally put my money where my mouth is in this area before. I've talked publicly about misplays that I made in big games. I've talked about deck building errors. I try to put quality stuff out there, but I don't do it in a way where I try to pretend that I am not a flawed card player. Like, if I could be better, I would. You know what I mean? But I don't think the coach has to necessarily be the best boxer in the room to be able to provide value to all the other people who are trying to improve their skills. And that's the approach I take on this show. Now, an episode like this, I will admit, sort of flies in the face of that philosophy because this episode is very much self-aggrandizing and self-indulgent. But it's a round number. I'm allowed. It's 400. I'm allowed to talk about the show in a meta way for a little while. The last time I did it was September 1st, 2021. That's probably not true. I did that housekeeping episode a few months ago. But regardless, it's been a long 7 years. Most of it has been awesome. And that is what I would prefer to focus on. I would prefer to focus on friendships I've made through... It's funny how Versus has been this arena where I've made multiple friends through kind of like lightly teasing each other over the internet. A little bit of ribbing, a little bit of trash talk, but all in this kind of like respectful way where, man, it's so hard to put your finger on it because like when somebody's being teasing, you can usually tell. Not always, and personally, I'm not the best at always gauging the emotional states of other people, but generally speaking, I think that when somebody is sort of giving you some lighthearted crap, trash talking in a friendly way, trying to enhance the experience of those around them by making it a little bit spicy. I think you can generally distinctly tell that from when somebody's just being disrespectful or when somebody is choosing to trash talk in a way that's like dehumanizing or rude or belittling of somebody else. And one of those is really cool and the other one is not. And it's really hard to make a clear line. This sentence is okay, but because the same sentence said in two different ways from two different people has two different meanings. And I understand when people sometimes feign confusion. Well, I don't understand why he could say that and I couldn't. Okay, well, he's friends with that person. There's usually explanatory factors there. But this is just a roundabout way of saying that I think this community is just so full of people who kind of like get it, or at least are on the wavelength that I like to be on, where we can say self-aggrandizing things and trash talk about the game, but people aren't doing it in a way that's meant to be dehumanizing or belittling or make somebody else feel bad. And I think that's the line. The trash talk that makes your opponent, like when you trash talk your opponent and your opponent is having fun with it, it's like the practical joke rule. Like if you play a prank on somebody and the person who is the target of the prank didn't think it was funny, then it's not funny. Full stop. It doesn't matter. Like if you pull a chair out from underneath somebody and you laugh at them breaking their tailbone, that's not a joke. That's not a prank. That's you being a bad person. And that's kind of how I feel about trash talk in a way, is like we're all here playing this relatively obscure card game and we're all taking time away from our families and lives to be able to do it. And it is kind of a weird and niche and specific thing that we're doing. But we're all pulling in the same direction. We're all trying to have fun with this thing. And some of this like, oh, I'm going to beat you. No, I'm going to beat you. This kind of conversation is a lot of fun to have. And for the most part, with very few exceptions over the last 7 years, it has not tipped into like personal attacks or bringing down the mood. It is like the trash talk has, generally speaking, inflated the mood. And it's surprising I'm a part of a lot of game communities. It's surprising to find a game community where so many people are kind of on that same page, where it's like, well, yeah, we'll make Facebook posts saying we're going to beat each other up on the card table, but at the end of the day, we're actually all friends, or at least friendly. I don't want to overspeak. I don't know how many of you claim me as a friend, and you know what? Fair play. It's just, I feel so lucky. Like, admittedly, part of it is that the Versus community is small. It's only a few thousand people. But there's other game communities that are so much more like focused on trying to maintain a casual, friendly environment. And they just struggle and have such a hard time with it that it's kind of weird how Versus seems to attract the sort of people who get it. And I think part of that's the community, because if you start to get into this game and you start acting toxic, pretty quickly the community claps back. So there is that sort of self-correcting measure. And some of that is the fact that a couple thousand people sounds like a lot of people, but that's a small internet community. So I think that's a contributing factor as well. But I mean, whatever the explanatory factor is, I actually don't care that much. Like, I only care that it is the way that it is. The way that it is in Versus, this sentence is a trade wreck, is awesome. What a bad sentence. So 400 episodes. This seems really cool. I think the last time I hit a big round number, I know 300 was the big one, but I think at 350 I did a little reflection as well. And I was like, am I still going to be doing this when I'm 50? I don't know, man. I wasn't sure I was going to do it for 7 years when I started. And yet here we are, getting dangerously close to being closer to 8 years than 7. So what are some of my favorite early day memories that I haven't talked to death on the show? Well, man, I guess if it's something I remember from the early days, I probably have talked about it on the show because I remember it. Stuff like, I have zero recollection of walking into Origins and sitting down to play Vernley and going, hey, I'm Mr. Ben. Like, the idea that I would introduce myself as Mr. Ben and not just Ben is so horribly, unacceptably, like, pretentious and weird. Like, I don't know what I was thinking. Vern swears it happened, so I guess I have to believe him. But oh my goodness, what a ew. What a bad decision. So I do enjoy that. I remember, I think the first interaction I ever had with C-Stacks directly was him saying like, hey man, will you add my video channel to the pinned post on the collective? And I was like, yeah, of course. And I hadn't come across his channel before. And then I went to his page and the top post was like, oh, the biggest YouTube channel in Versus, and it's not on the pinned post. It's like, yeah, man, it is now. It's funny how when I try to think of fond memories in Versus, it's always, or at least in this moment, it has been a couple of examples of where I've gotten something wrong or done something dumb. I mean, I have fond memories of doing things right as well. Getting particularly strong plays to close games out has felt really good. But that feels good to everybody. I think everybody likes winning games. Everybody likes coming up with a deck that's their own thing and taking it to an event where everybody's trying their hardest to ruin your day and instead ruining their days. Like, so to sit here and like wax poetic about how cool it feels to get a particular result or to have made a certain play, like, I think that's valid. And in fact, I actually really enjoy hearing like tournament recaps and that kind of content. So I'm not crapping on it, but like I guess that's not the flavor of reminiscence that I was trying to conjure. Thinking about I guess I'm thinking about it kind of in a meta way, like back over the years. I remember when the Upper Deck cease and desist that wasn't officially a cease and desist came down to Ben Rugg to pull verses off of or Ben Ruig, sorry, to pull verses off of Tabletop Simulator, and how dark it felt for the game. The idea that Upper Deck would actively try to stop players from playing the game. And I get it in their defense. If they don't defend the IP, then Marvel can say you're mishandling the IP and we're going to take it back. Like, you could have bad consequences from the game. I get it. But as somebody whose main goal is seeing as many people as possible play this game that I love so much, it was such a dark, dark day. And it really, the online game community didn't totally recover until COVID. Like, we ran a few more build phase events after the tabletop simulator shutdown happened, but it wasn't like, it's a lot harder to get people to play. At the time, I think we were using Skype, which is, whew, it was a lot harder to get people to play. Like, if they had the option to do that or to go to the store and play a different game, like a lot of times people opted for a different game. And I think I know on this show I've given credit, and I've heard other shows give credit for C-Stacks for really spearheading the let's get webcam play normalized in Versus there at the beginning of COVID. And good. He was the guy who had the gumption, who had the motivation to make it happen. And once that nut was cracked, I don't think we're ever going back. Like, sure, online tournaments might not have the same kind of player count as they did when none of us could leave our homes. They're still consistently pulling in players. Buckeye League has consistently kept going basically the whole time since COVID and up to now. And that's great. There's other new creators like the Aces and Eights guides putting on their show. So there's more webcam tournament activity than there ever was. And a lot of the credit for the push to getting that started during quarantine needs to go to C-Stacks. 400 episodes. Hopefully, this last 7 years, oh my God, has generated value for the audience, for you as listeners, that you are able to hear things about the game that make you think about cards in a better way or become a better card player. Our tagline of like the build phase, helping you build a better turn, that really has always been the guiding philosophy. I want to add value to the listeners' lives in a way that you can be a better card player. Like, I want to meet your goals in the game. If you don't care about being a sharper tournament card player, there's probably a lot of what I talk about that isn't great advice for you. But if all you want to do is just take your fun kitchen table ideas and make them a little bit less janky and a little bit more consistent, I can help with that. And I feel like a lot of the conversations, a lot of the monologues that I have engaged in on this show about card value and fundamentals of card games, that benefits casual players as well as competitive, even though clearly there's a competitive bend in the way I analyze the game. Will there be 400 more of these? Man, I don't know. I guess if the game keeps going and I keep enjoying talking about it, sure, maybe we'll still be doing 7 years from now. So I'll be 50. Oh, that's weird to think about. I really think at the end of the day, that is the guiding principle, though. If I ever reach the point where I feel like this is work and not, again, I made this distinction before. I don't mind working on this. I don't mind putting the work in. The effort is fine. But if it doesn't feel rewarding as a project, if I'm doing it because I feel like I owe it to the patrons, which on some level I do. Shout out to my patrons, people helping keep the lights on around here. If you like what we've been doing for the last 400 episodes and want to join the coolest clubhouse in Versus, patreon.com/thebuildphase. And on some level, I do feel an obligation to the people who have thrown money at this project and helped me pay the server fees, which no matter how much I upload, the server fees stay the same every month. And that's cool. Like, I really appreciate, like, from the bottom of my heart, like, it is a humbling and just amazing thing that there are other people who like this game that want to support what I'm doing and that find value enough that they're willing to throw some money at the project that I've got going on here. Like, that's incredible. But I what I owe those people more than content is sincere content. Like, that has been my watchword from day one, is I want to say the things that I really believe. And if it ever hits the point where I just don't have anything else to say about Versus, where the fire in my heart about the rule situation ceases to burn, where there aren't new sets or something, although I did a year's worth of episodes with basically no new sets. So I am capable of surviving content droughts for this game. Like, I love this game. I love playing this game, but I'm not going to fake it. I'm not ever going to come on here and pretend to be really excited about something if I don't feel anything about it. I won't pretend to like something that I hate. I won't do that either. I'm always going to be sincere. And it is on some level difficult for me to peer into the future and see 7 more years of making this show. But I don't think that's because there's any passion lost or any love lost between me and the show and Versus. Like, that fire still burns pretty bright. It's just, how many words can you say before you've said all there is? Like, I went on a rant yesterday on Discord about the rules situation and the the email system that was implemented now years ago, which felt at the time like a big step backwards. And as email responses have gotten slower and slower and fewer and further between, it has felt like a further and further step backwards. And the 2 steps forward that it was supposed to facilitate just haven't materialized. Now, I'm sure the people at Upper Deck who are in charge of handling all of this hear this and go, "Oh, you're being unfair. Ben, you don't know the work we've done behind the scenes, and we can't do this until we do this, and we can't do that until we get this lawyer to sign off, and that lawyer won't sign off until this other lawyer signs off, and we can't even talk to that lawyer until we get this done." Okay, like, whatever the explanation is, like, okay, but it's literally been years. And at this point, I think it's just safe to say that rules maintenance, if there's a hierarchy of priorities with regard to this game at Upper Deck, rules maintenance is lower on that list of priorities than I think it should be. It's lower on that list of priorities than I think the community deserves. Legitimate, organized play gets less attention and is lower on the priority list than I think it deserves. Yes, the regional changes over the last couple of years have been steps in the right direction, and I give Upper Deck credit when they deserve it, but there are many things about this game. There's complaints about this game that I've had literally for years, and you don't hear me talk about them as much anymore. And it's not because the problem's been fixed. It's because I've just run out of gas to keep being irritated, to keep pointing out this thing. We all know it's a problem. And I guess we just have to accept that it's a problem that doesn't appear to have a solution coming ever, question mark, anytime on the... and honestly, it's a testament to the game how the community has poured itself into the vacuum left by Upper Deck's inattention to rules maintenance. We have an extremely active community that tries to maintain, like, shout out to Jason, by the way. I still think of this guy as a new player, but he's been in the game for years now. Shout out to Jason. Maintaining the Reddit wiki, that's a huge undertaking. And Danny is the other guy who has maintained Versus presence on Reddit. See, anytime I start naming people by names, I think of other people that deserve credit too. There are a lot of people in this community who deserve by name credit for helping maintain and evangelize the rule system of this game to the new players who come in and have legitimate questions, or the established players who aren't totally sure how something works out. I try to be a positive contribution to those conversations, although I fully acknowledge sometimes the way I talk is not productive in those conversations. And so apologies for the times I have derailed rules conversations by not phrasing things artfully or diplomatically. This issue that I popped off about yesterday has not been solved. It's been going on forever. But I don't really want to talk about it that often anymore. Every once in a while, it gets to me, and the irritation at it leaks out onto Discord, or I guess in this podcast. But it's a boring thing to just keep talking about over and over and over again. Like, the rule system The way we inquire and get rulings on stuff doesn't work well, okay? It needs to be fixed. Upper Deck has to be aware of that. What more can I say? That's a negative thing. And I don't like talking about negative stuff generally speaking. I think it's a lot more fun to talk about cool cards and cool tournament formats and neat decks and cool play. Like, I prefer to talk about the game and the positive things around the game. But I can conceive of a world where I have run out of ways to rehash the card fundamentals conversation, where I run out of things to say about Versus. And considering how many hundreds of hours I've already invested, it's hard for me to believe that that day doesn't exist out there somewhere on an approaching horizon. Now, I don't think it's soon. I'm still super pumped about this game. I'm thrilled for Midwinter. Couldn't be happier about the boys cards that came out this year, the Mortal Kombat cards, even the AEW cards, which I again talked about on the show how I was not a fan of at first, but have completely won me over. Yeah, I'm with every inch of where the game is going as a game, and I hope to keep talking about it for a long time to come. But if there ever comes a day where I've said all I have to say, I will hang it up before I come on here and fake it. I guess that is a 30-minute way of saying that I'll stop talking when I'm ready to stop talking. Yeah, actually, you know what? That's the perfect parting thought. I didn't plan it this way, but that's the perfect parting thought. This has been the Builds Phase. I'm Mr. Ben, and I'll stop talking when I'm ready to stop talking. Go win some games.